Cryptocurrency, good, bad, indifferent? What do you think?
I actually, after that introduction, was hoping to spend a few minutes talking about the importance of hair care. You touched on virtually everything else. I have discovered a very nice gel. All right, in case any was interested, we can always talk about. I have a new colorist and stylist. All right, that I'm working with, and I'm very optimistic about how that's going to go in the future. Now, cryptocurrency. Where to start? It is a technology that has extraordinary potential and has, in my view, been profoundly misused in so many different ways to this point that it almost sucks the oxygen from the room. And let me try to, there's so many different ways you can go from that perspective, but let me just try to point out one fundamental paradox that I think in the long run is really going to limit the application of what most people view as cryptocurrencies. Now, we're going to get a little technical for a second, but sometimes it's important. Many people think that if you're running a cryptocurrency, and if it isn't what's called a permissionless system, it's not really a cryptocurrency. Now, what does it mean to be a permissionless system? What it means is that as a theoretical matter, and here let me really underscore the word theoretical, that anybody can participate in the process of validating transactions to the block, all right? That any of us in this room could, in theory, be part of the process whereby Bitcoin, in effect, replicates itself and you're actually able to add a new transaction to the block. And in the early days of Bitcoin, it was theoretically possible to be sitting and watching your Netflix or HBO and have your laptop running and you could make money confirming stuff to the block. Can't do that now. Get to that in a second. But the idea of a permissionless system is so incompatible with every regulatory structure that every government knows that it's impossible to look at these systems as anything other than nihilistic threats to government regulation of any form of which we're aware. Now, many people in the crypto community would listen to what I just said, and their response would be, well, yes, of course. All right, we want to put it to the man. All right, we don't trust, somebody to run these ledgers. We don't want to have central authorities, and we don't want to be regulated. I get that. That's fine. But as a practical matter, you could understand why regulators and government authorities around the world will listen to that business plan and will respond by saying, I'm less than enthusiastic, all right, about the idea that a bunch of nihilists that can be controlled by no one will wind up being able to manage or operate billions of dollars of cash flow and of wealth. So at that level, there really is a fundamental tension between what many people view as crypto and what I would describe as civilized society, okay? And a lot of stuff gets said and talked about, all right, around all of the different edges. But if you don't start from that perspective and really understand that if you give the extremist crypto people what they want, all right, you're setting up an absolutely irreconcilable battle between the state and a bunch of insurgents who are very happy to have the state come down.
Isn't it true that cryptocurrency is a use case for blockchain? And certainly you would acknowledge that blockchain itself as a technology is very robust. But I want to prompt you to highlight where it's not really blockchain.
Okay, so blockchain is a technology, we could spend a whole day talking about what it isn't. Cryptocurrency is a particular use of blockchain technology. But another way to think about blockchain technology is it's really a massive database with an immutable audit trail. That's all that it is. It's a database. You can all have access to the database, and whenever you change the database, everybody sees how the database has been changed. And if you stop and if you think about it, there are dozens of technologies that will give you databases with immutable audit trails. Oracle will sell you one. They'll charge you too much for it, okay? But they'll sell you one. And if at the end of the day, the global demand is for transparent databases with immutable audit trails that you can operate at low cost, blockchain is just one way of getting there. And depending upon the particular use case, it's not even necessarily the best or most efficient or least cost way of getting there. The big innovation, such as it is of crypto and of blockchain, is that you can run these trustless systems. Trust me, you don't want a trustless system, okay? And if you start looking at it carefully, there really is no such thing as a trustless system. The issue is, whom do you trust for what purpose, right? And let's go to Bitcoin, okay? Sure, you don't have to trust the United States government, but what you don't realize is you're trusting the Chinese government, right? Why do I say? Wait a minute. When they invented Bitcoin, did anybody say, I tell you what, we're going to structure this so at the end of the day, in about 10 years, the Chinese government is going to have de facto control over Bitcoin? No. Why does the Chinese government, in my view, have de facto control over Bitcoin? Simple. There are these operations that are called miners, right? The miners, as a practical matter, run and replicate the blockchains, okay? And in order to be an efficient miner, what you need today is to have specialized chips. These are ASICs chips, and these chips are not cheap, and they don't come in your laptop computer. The other thing that you need is cheap electricity, because Bitcoin is an electricity hog. When you have to solve the algorithmic puzzle that leads to the replication of the database, you use a tremendous amount of energy. So you couldn't do this here in Silicon Valley because PG&E is going to charge you too much for the electricity.
And then shut it off right before,
Right, exactly
yes.
right. I was going to say, it comes to you, assuming you can get the electricity, okay? So what happened in a way that the founders of Bitcoin did not anticipate, and here's the key thing, the founders of Bitcoin are much better mathematicians than they are social engineers or political scientists. It may be, all right, that the founders of Bitcoin are mathematical geniuses, but if so, in my view, they are idiot savants, all right? Fantastic at crypto, but in terms of understanding how the world would evolve once you introduce this kind of tool into the environment. So let me finish the story, how China actually runs Bitcoin. So in today's world, if you look at the percentage of transactions that are confirmed, right, they're typically confirmed by what's known as mining pools, and more than 50% of the transactions are confirmed by mining pools located where? China. Okay, terrific. It turns out that if you control more than 50% of what's often called the hash power, you can then cause these chains to do what's called a hard fork, and you can, in effect, take over the chain, right? You can change the rules. And if you stop and if you think about it, well, okay, the designers of Bitcoin said, well, wait a minute, a majority of the user community should be able to control the rule for the community. And in some sort of Jeffersonian agrarian ideal, all right, if all of your users, all right, are people sitting at their laptops watching HBO around the world, and you get a majority of the users to say, great, we want to make a change, I understand how that really sounds like, participatory democracy, a little bit like we all used to get together in the forum in Athens and all the citizens would vote and we're now all citizens. Cool. But it was never going to evolve that way. It would start that way. It could never have stayed that way. And the irony is, the more successful the operation, the lower the probability that it would stay in that kind of naive agrarian form. I mean, that totally predictable in my view at the outset. So now what you have is more than 50% of the hash power being run by Chinese pools, mining pools. Let me ask a question. If the Chinese government told each one of these pools, we want you to do the following, all right, to the Bitcoin chain, what is the probability that they will not do it? 0, okay? So, because of a variety of economic and other factors, China now has, in my view, the government of China has de facto control of Bitcoin. And they're being geniuses about this because guess what you can't buy and sell in China? Bitcoin, okay? So China is set itself up so that the Chinese Bitcoin infrastructure is guaranteed simultaneously to be making a lot of money from global Bitcoin transactions because they're the miners and they're getting paid for this, and to actually take over control, all right? Now, they haven't done anything that anybody knows about to use that control, but from my perspective, they don't have to, okay? If they ever wanted to bring Bitcoin down, 15 seconds? Hi, this is Xi. What do you want? Okay? I mean, you know, it's not a problem.
Well, and so enter the scene with Facebook suggesting that, not explicitly, that if you're really trying to decrease transactions costs in exchange and trade, and that's part of the argumentative explanation of a cryptocurrency, then there are certain winner-take-all features, there's certain platform advantages. So there is a natural logic that says, hey, now that everyone has heard the word, people are holding it but not transacting with it, let's invent something better that will actually serve the purported purpose that we said it was. And so enter Libra, but it's turned out that it's gotten more complicated, that not more than you anticipated, but than a lot of people anticipated. And I wonder if you can lay the groundwork for us for what Libra means potentially in the context of this backdrop of, from your viewpoint, a very dysfunctional cryptocurrency environment, particularly with Bitcoin, but most of what you described applies to almost all the other cryptocurrencies.
Well, yeah, okay, so, you know, sometimes it's helpful to be reductionist about something and to basically say, Libra is going to fail. It has to fail in any form at all similar to what's been proposed, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. All right, the concept of using something like crypto to reduce transactions costs is a brilliant idea and is entirely correct. Stop and think about it this way. And you know, to me, Facebook has an interesting answer to the wrong problem. They started at the wrong place. It's a little bit like they picked up a telescope and they say, cool, and they're looking through it through the wrong end, and they're making like everything a little smaller, okay? If Zuckerberg listened to me, number one, the world would be a better place.
Probably true.
Number two, Libra would have been designed very differently at the outset. So here's what they're doing. They say, there's a huge problem in international money transfer. It's very expensive. They're right. We need to come up with a system that facilitates international money transfer. They're right. We need to drive these costs down. They're right. But that's the wrong place to start for so many different reasons. All right? I'll give you one real simple one. So suppose you're doing international money transfer, and country A says you must do X, and country B says you may never do X. What's Libra going to do? Screwed.
Stuck.
Screwed. Okay? It's a technical legal term.
Yes.
Right? You can't make it work. Also, Libra has said that they plan to evolve and to move to a permissionless system. Well, you've all heard my views about permissionless systems. Okay, and the interesting thing is, when I talk to people about it, people really knowledgeable in the space, they sort of look at it and they go, yeah, that's right. But what's interesting is the technologists seem not to be bothered by that. All right, they view it as a feature. I view it as like it's a fatal flaw. It's a bug. All right, have you ever talked to a regulator that says, "Oh no, 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 we're fine with billions of dollars existing out of the system, and there's no way that we're ever going to be able to control it"? Those people don't exist. All right, and Zuckerberg and his team have discovered that Washington is filled with those kind of people. And what's really intriguing is very often people are nibbling around the edges of the problem, and you could sit down, you could say, look. There are 4 or 5 things about Libra that are just simply fatal. It can't work. Now, transactions costs are too high, not only internationally, but also domestically. You take out your credit card, and what does it typically cost you or the merchant? And trust me, if it costs the merchant, it's getting passed on to you. What does it typically cost you to use a credit card? About 2%. Right, 2.5%.
Well, that's on a good day.
Roger.
Small merchant.
How are you?
3%, right?
Seen you a
Maybe
while.
more.
Yeah, so 2-3%. Okay, that's the equivalent of a 2 to 3% national sales tax that we are all bearing, and is not being used to build roads, to pay teacher salaries, to fight fires, and to keep our electricity on. Okay, wouldn't it be interesting and wonderful if instead of starting with something that's doomed to fail, in order to make it cheaper to move money from Zimbabwe to Pakistan, Facebook said, hey, we can make it cheaper for you to buy those handy wipes off of Amazon. That's where I would start. Don't ask me to explain anything that Facebook does.
Well, maybe explain what Visa and PayPal, though that's starting to fall apart. Why did they?
Well, because when they initially start, right, so initially, if the vision is to facilitate international payments, that's not a threat to their business, right? And they would want a seat at the table, and they would want to learn about this technology, and they'd want to try to figure out how they could participate. Now, what I'm talking about, that if Facebook really wanted to do it right, in my view, they would go to war with Visa and with MasterCard, and they would say, we can set up, because we own the network, all right? The hard thing in all of this stuff is to own the network, all right? To have the email addresses and the names of all of the people, all right? We got the network. Well, what we're gonna do in terms of the regulatory structure, we're not gonna flip the bird, all right, to all of the world's regulators. What we're going to say is, we're going to hire the best lawyers, we're going to hire the best compliance people, and we're going to start a regulated bank. Okay, the Bank of Zuckerberg. All right, Zuckerberg, first Zuck Bank. Okay, and it's going to be a fully regulated entity. And guess what's going to happen? We're going to structure it so that everybody on Facebook also has an account at First Zuck. And you know what's going to happen? Amazon is also going to have an account at First Zuck, all right? And everybody else, Sam's Club is going to, everybody will have. And if you ever want to pay for something, you don't use PayPal, you don't use your credit card. You've got the cash in your account at First Zuck, and it goes immediately to Amazon, and the transactions cost is pennies. Would Amazon love that? Yeah. Would Facebook users love that? Yeah. Would MasterCard love that? No. Would Visa love that? No. Okay? But is that the kind of thing that you could imagine regulators and Americans getting behind and going, yay, Facebook? Yeah. Now, you're all going to turn to me, you're going to say, well, why didn't they do that? To which my response is, I got a long list of things about why didn't Facebook do that. All right, and each one, I'll tell you, Zuckerberg didn't call me and say, Joe, what do you think we should do about this?
I'm going to ask you a background question that maybe gets at that a little bit, and it's this tension between solving the problem that's in front of you, as you just described.
I think they picked the wrong problem to solve.
And do you think, and this is a question about your interpretation of Sheryl Sandberg's discussions, the public-facing information, anything else you know, do you think that they are trying to balance two tensions? One is this notion, which isn't quite the libertarian have a permissionless system where there's no government intervention, but something that's akin to that, which is this decentralized finance system. In other words, your vision doubled down on the US banking system in some ways, right? What you just described.
Yeah.
But there is clearly, I think in the rhetoric and in some other things, a preference to avoid the banking system. It's not an anarchist
Why?
libertarian thing. That's my question to you. Why is there any reason other than the angst around the banking system that Facebook went in that direction? Is there something we're not understanding or seeing?
Again, there's so many things that Facebook does where, I'll be as polite as I can. I'll just simply say, I wouldn't have done it that way. All right. Could we still make $1 bazillion and do things differently? Oh, yeah. Would I argue that the stock price could even be higher if you would have done things, Joe's way? Oh, yeah. Okay. So now this is pure speculation. There are many people who are highly talented in the crypto space who actually believe in the fundamental nihilist, anarchistic, we don't need to trust anybody, we don't want to trust anyone's view. Is it possible that there's, a piece of Zuckerberg, the early coder, that is institutionally sympathetic to that? I don't know. Right? If that's right, I'm stunned that it hasn't been beaten out of him by the system, and it would be entirely consistent with several other mistakes that in all candor, a more mature, more experienced business person would likely not have made.
Well, the European regulators, who have been more vocal on this in part because they're more politicized than our regulators, have, I think, espoused the view that in their sense, this is a play at sovereign power, is a sort of attempt to circumvent established systems worldwide and to create something that is an alternative and, in their view, a threat. Do you think there's any, do you see any path for Facebook pulling that off at all?
Hell no.
What stops it? What are the top
no.
3 things that stop it? Because there are many in the crypto community who say it's going to be bumpy, but Facebook is going to figure it out and achieve their vision. And you feel very strongly the opposite way. So what are kind of the 3 top things that prevent that?
It depends entirely on what they look. If they're going to try to do that, they're going to have to do something equivalent to what I call a jailbreak, all right, and do something equivalent to an Uber. Right, and Lyft move, where, look, a lot of the early stuff that Uber and Lyft did was simply illegal, all right? We're not going to pay attention to any of the local taxi regulations, and we're just going to start doing stuff, and yeah, it's a violation, but here's our calculation. Our violations are going to be so popular with the user community and with the drivers that the locals will wind up changing the regulations once they understand how valuable this is, and will just simply look past the fact that we're rule breakers and law violators early on, because it's for a good purpose. It's an interesting business strategy, but in my experience, ask Elizabeth Holmes, it does not work in things like food and drug. It also does not work in the financial services sector. So,
And once you're publicly traded, announcing your strategy is in violation of, 132
it'll be
laws.
Oh, look, the number of lawsuits. I mean,
Okay.
the precise way in which he gets shot down depends entirely on where he launches and how he launches and what he intends to do. And think about it this way. You have to have this thing that's called the Libra Foundation, and people have already run screaming, right, from that room, saying, I signed up, I'm out of here, all right? You ask some of these organizations, well, why did you sign up with Libra? And they go, Libra? What's Libra? I've never heard of Libra in my entire life. All right, you start doing this jailbreak thing in the world of financial, regulated institutions. Who's going to want to be on the Libra board? Who's going to want to be on the Libra Foundation?
You and I have met those regulators. That would
Oh,
be
yeah,
a scary
yeah.
moment.
I mean, this
Sure.
is, yeah, I mean, but again, there's a good idea there. It's just, I would flip it entirely. Do it domestically. Do Libra US, do Libra Great Britain, do Libra Euro. Get all of the regulators in each jurisdiction entirely comfortable with your domestic Libra system. Drive down the costs of the payment system. That will make you politically popular, all right, in each one of these jurisdictions. and then you want to do international transfer, great. I've got a system that's working in India. I got a system that's working in Zimbabwe. It's totally compatible with local law. Now, all we need to do is link Zimbabwe and India, all right? And okay, so we'll have to do 800 of these different links, but each one of them is going to be entirely legal.
The quote unquote next generation of cryptocurrencies tried to solve for a lot of different problems, some successfully, some not. I think your sum, I'll give your punchline, but I want you to add color to it, is that all of the overtures thus far don't get away from the fundamental permissionless issue and, frankly, the transparency problem inherent in most of the cryptocurrencies that are out there. But there is this idea, and Libra is a piece of this, of a notion of a stable coin. And a stable coin gets linked to a basket of or a certain currency. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a stable coin is in theory, how you think it's played out? You can pick Tether, you can pick a couple, and then how that relates to Libra. Because for the moderate skeptics, the idea of introducing a stable coin strategy goes a long way towards solving some of the problems, or so people say. So I want you to talk about stable coins, then we're going to flip to other questions.
Well, stable coin, the basic idea is you have a crypto unit, and that unit is in some sense backed, whatever backed means, by something that has real value in the real world, okay? So you could have a stable coin where each coin is backed by a US dollar. You could have a stable coin where each coin is backed by an ounce of gold. You could have a stable coin where, it's backed by a Mickey Mantle rookie baseball card, okay? So there's a certain sense where, again, what you've done is you've invented something that's been with us for hundreds of years. This is the electronic equivalent of a depository receipt, okay? You deposit something in a bank, it stays in the vault, and you've got a receipt, and you trade the receipt, and the stuff that's in the bank always stays in the vault in the bank, and it never moves. So, great, we've invented something that we've had for thousands of years.
But auditors have an easier time with one
Here's-
version of that and not the other, yeah?
So, you take Tether, which is supposedly, the broadest used form of stablecoin. And if something's really a stablecoin, maybe I've spent too much time working with people that have, not working with,
Interacting
interacting
to.
with, violently opposing people engaged in frauds, okay? So if somebody has a stable coin, and if it's really backed, all right, suppose they got $1 billion worth of stable coins and it's really backed by $1 billion, then the rational thing for them to do is to make it trivially easy to verify and validate that the $1 billion is really there. It should be as costless and transparent as possible. If instead you have to pull teeth in order to get partial information that indicates that it might or might not be fully backed, well, at that point you run screaming from the room, because you know what the answer is. It's not fully backed. Some of the money has leaked from the system, and I know how this money always leaks from the system, all right? It's in some account that you'll never be able to touch in Cyprus, or someplace else, right? The money's gone.
And Tether's a great example of that. And yet Tether is still moderately well thought of in some circles. It's treated as if it's not a fraud. And so this leads to my final question before we turn over to folks, and it needs background.
By the way, I've looked. If anybody knows of any way to short Tether, please come see me. All right, because if you're asking me,
Big
for
enough
my
crowd, we
favorite,
can make a market maybe.
Yeah, no, if
Find
you're
that
asking me, if you want, all right, look, this is not investment advice. I'm not licensed to give investment advice. All right, this is pure, off the cuff opinion. Anybody comes up with a good way to short Libra, okay, where I don't have to pay a lot of carry costs to do it, all right, please let me know, because my prediction very simply is, and the only question is when, all right? A great phrase I heard from one of my hedge fund trading friends is, just because something is inevitable doesn't mean that it's imminent. All right, so, in my view, issues, I'll be polite, issues with Tether are inevitable, hard to know when and why and precisely how they will manifest themselves. So simply because they're inevitable does not mean that they are imminent. That said, I would still love to short the daylights out of Tether.
I think you've officially just thrown down the gauntlet on Libra, just so you know, but that's
Oh.
okay. The inevitable imminent is the first derivative of the markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
Exactly right.
Which brings me to this question, but here's the background that gives you an edge on answering this question, which I think is maybe impossible to answer. When you were SEC commissioner, and you told me a little bit of the story, but I've gotten the full story from others, you did something really radical at the time, and that was you got on the phone and you started making appointments with people in the marketplace. So like every player, and you went and you visited them. You went and you had coffee and you had lunch and you had meetings, and you actually showed up and said, "Hi, I'm Joe Grenfest. I'm an SEC commissioner. I'd really like to understand your perspectives on the market, the exchanges, the whatever." And then you sat there and listened to people. And I didn't know that this was radical, but apparently this was very radical at the time. And you did this for, not dozens, but hundreds of folks across your entire tenure. And it resulted in, my view, in an unusual set of insights, which is there's what we think we want to have happen, there's what we regulate to have happen, there's what we manage to enforce to make happen, there's what people think about all that, and then there's what people do. And none of these fully align. And so in the crypto market, what people do, there is a substantial pool of very smart, maybe overly mathy people across the world, backed with fantastically large assets at this point, who keep making affirmative bets on cryptocurrency. And so either they don't understand the irrational solvency challenge or the inevitable imminent gap, but what is that explanation? Like, why is it that some very smart people you and I know and respect, are making these very big, very long bets on cryptocurrency?
Well, so here's something that I know you're probably not thinking is possible. Maybe I'm wrong.
A tiny
I know,
voice way back in my head.
I know it's a
Maybe.
crazy idea. I know it's a crazy idea. I know you got to be out of your mind. But, there is a probability that I'm not 100% right about everything that I've said this morning. In fact, that's almost certainly true. And is there a state of the world in which, for a variety of reasons, this crypto winds up having long-term real value and grows, even though it's, look, here's a legitimate use case for crypto that we have not talked about, all right? You have assets and you're in Venezuela. You have assets and you're in Zimbabwe, and you're facing unbelievable instability in your local regime and unbelievable inflation. Well, you have two choices, both of them are bad. One, keep your money in Venezuela. Two, get it into crypto. If I were in that situation, I would get it into crypto, okay? So, I don't want to leave people with the observation that there's no use case for crypto. There is, but I just happen to think that it's much edgier than most people, than many of the proponents think. So what is the use case for crypto? Look, if I'm running a meth lab, all right, I'm not going to be taking check account from you. Yeah, so, I supply you the drugs. Here's the fentanyl, you give me the Bitcoin, okay? If I'm going to be kidnapping people, the problem with kidnapping people is not finding the people to kidnap, all right? They're relatively easy. The problem is getting paid the damn ransom, all right? It's right, it's the clearing mechanism, because that's where you always get caught.
It worries me that you've thought so much about this, but okay.
Well, there are actually functional reasons for that. So look, people who have a lot of Bitcoin rationally don't want other people to know that they have a lot of Bitcoin, because they then are the easiest kidnap targets, all right? Because look, I tell you what, I'll let you go for $1 million. You just send me the Bitcoin. We don't have to agree to meet under a bridge where there might be a sniper that's going to shoot me as soon as I take the damn bag. Just send me the Bitcoin and I'll let you go. It's a much more efficient transaction. By the way, for any kidnappers watching, I have no Bitcoin. I am useless. Okay? For totally obvious reasons. So we were talking about something else, but I got onto this kidnapping thing.
The rare possibility that you could be wrong about the long run picture.
Oh, no, there are use cases. There are use cases. So if you have government instability and if your decision not to trust a particular government turns out to be a good one, and that happens, right? There's no doubt about it. Having something like, all right, Bitcoin, good idea.
Got it.